So then, I wonder, if I was to ask you, what has so far, maybe better to come, but so far, what has been the best day of your life? I wonder how you would answer. I'm going to put up a few pictures which might jog some memories. Okay, so I wonder, might we look back to a birthday party? I think by the candles this looks like a 6th birthday party, partly through counting the candles and also looking to see how many teeth are missing from the children who are celebrating. They look like roughly 6 or 7-year-olds. So might we look back and say, that was the best day of my life so far because my friends came, I had a cake, I had presents, we went off and did this. It was a wonderful, wonderful day. Or maybe we celebrate birthdays in a slightly more sedate way, but nonetheless enjoyable. So maybe a meal out with friends or with family. Is there a particular one we might look back to and say, that was such a lovely day, a really, really special day for me? Maybe the day we passed our driving test. So maybe that sense of independence. Here I can now drive my car, I can go wherever I want, as long as you can actually afford the fuel and the insurance. And also for those of you, I apologise, who've heard this before, who actually, if you're a young person, managed to get a driving test, because if you want to consider how our country are serving our young people, such a little thing and so important. Driving tests are so hard to come by that we are failing them in not allowing that sort of step of independence. But maybe we look back, I passed, now I can go wherever, except we're too scared to then, aren't we? But anyway, we can. Maybe the day we got married. Okay, really special day in many people's lives. Or indeed, maybe somebody in your family or your friend or wedding that you've been to. Maybe that is a really, really special day. Maybe a journey that we've been on, so maybe to a special place. Maybe the way we went was special. Maybe the place we went to or who with and so forth. Or possibly coming home, although that's always nice, isn't it? But not quite so exciting. But maybe that's could be considered one of your best days. Birth of a child, so maybe your child or maybe a grandchild, great-grandchild, maybe a friend, godchild, niece, nephew, whatever relationship it might be. But maybe for you, that was the day that everything was just good. You know, this child was born and everything was wonderful. Maybe the first day, getting a pension, you know, the sort of feeling of a whole month has gone, I haven't done a stroke of work, and lo and behold, money's appeared in my bank account. You know, what an extraordinary feeling that could be. So maybe that was a really, really good day. Maybe moving into our first property, so that might be a rented studio, or it might be a flat, it might be a house, whatever it might be. But that sense of ownership, whether we're renting, whether we're buying, this sense of this is mine, you know, I can do what I like with it. Is that, you look back and say, that was the beginning, that was important, that was really special. And a day when you actually perhaps move in this really neat and tidy and organised way. I'm in the middle of moving house from one to another. Our move is not like that at all. It's complete chaos. Maybe some sort of educational turning point was an important one for you. So maybe getting a degree, or maybe achieving BTECs, maybe, you know, GCSE results, O-level results. Do you look back and say, I worked hard and that was such a celebration. You know, I was pleased with the results and that was a really, really special day for me. Or maybe the first day that we earned some money. So we actually felt, here is some money of my own. This is something that I can do what I like with once we've paid, you know, this bill and this bill and this bill. But, you know, the 10p that's over, that's mine and I can do. So maybe that was a special day. Okay, you know what comes next? If you would like to, turn to the people behind you or in front of you or next to you and just have a short conversation. What has been the best day of your life so far? If you don't want to talk to the person next to you, talk to the person behind you. If you don't want to take part, that's fine. Just listen to other people. But if you do, can I just say, make sure we don't miss somebody out, okay? So make sure everyone's involved. Who wants to be? Off you go. To that. Right, thank you very much for sharing all of that. Why have I got you to do this? It's always nice, I think, to learn something more about the people that we're worshipping with, so that they're not just somebody who we come to church either with or we sit in front of or behind and don't know a great deal about. So I think it's nice to know what makes them tick a bit, what makes them really sort of rejoice, and maybe also what things are difficult for them. But the other reason for doing this today is that we're going to be looking at a story from the Old Testament, a story about a king, King David, and maybe on a day that he might have said was the best day of his life. So when we look at that story, if we want to sort of engage with some of the emotions that were going on, we might sort of take ourselves back to what we said the best day was for us, and then read that story in that context. But before we move our service on, we're going to sing again. So, our Bible reading today, is coming from the Old Testament, and it's telling a story. It's telling quite a complicated story. So for all of those reasons, this is quite unusual. Usually we hear from the New Testament, and usually we hear something where we can directly pull a message, where we can hear easily, perhaps, although we might always want to hear it, what God is saying to us. This is not the situation today. Today is a bit different. We're focusing on the Old Testament, remembering that the background of the Old Testament is important to our understanding of Jesus, and also that for Jesus himself, the Old Testament would have been his scriptures. So the stories that we read and the understanding we take is the story and the stories and the reading that he did. So just a bit of introduction before we hear the reading of this story. The story that we're going to hear is all about the movement of what was called the Ark of the Lord. The Ark of the Lord. And we're going back to the time of King David, which is many, many, many years ago. But to understand what this Ark is and was, we need to go back even more than that. We need to go back to the time when the Jewish people had been led out of Egypt. They were wandering around in the desert for 40 years, and then moved into the Promised Land. While they were in the desert, they were very conscious of God's presence. God was giving them food, God was giving them water, God was ensuring that as a community they were developing and giving them laws to live by. One physical way in which God ensured the people did not forget that God was with them was that he called them to build what became known as an ark. It's not as big as Noah's Ark, otherwise they would have had a problem carrying it around the desert. It was effectively a wooden box that was used as a symbol of God's presence. Let me just read to you a description of this ark. It was a rectangular box made of wood, and measured, I'll give it to you in two different ways, either 4 by 2.5 by 2.5 feet, or, if you're a metric person, 1.22 metres times 76 centimetres times 76 centimetres. So it's not an enormous box, but they're the measurements. The whole of it was covered with gold, and it was carried on poles inserted in rings at the 4 lower corners. I think on the PowerPoint there is a picture. This isn't obviously the actual ark, but this is made up from the descriptions in the Bible that we have of it. So we can see here it's majestic, it's important, it's special, and it's expensive, which is how we judge those things sometimes. The lid, which was also called the mercy seat, there's a whole many things we could say about that, was a gold plate which had cherubs with outstretched wings on the top. The point of this is that this is a picture of God's presence, the symbol that God is with them. So as they moved around, so the ark went with them, and so they knew, they were reminded over and over again that God was with them. When they went into the Promised Land, the ark went with them and was important, but it tended to stay in one place, in a village, a small town, and it stayed there. So the leaders referred to it, people knew about it, but it wasn't quite so sort of directly moving around and in the middle of the community. Time moves on, and the Jewish people become more settled, and we come to the time of King David. David is a great king. The borders of Israel are very big. They're the biggest that they are under any king. And he builds his capital. Jerusalem becomes his capital. It's there as his capital in terms of politics, it's there as his capital in terms of the economy, in terms of trade, in terms of military exercises and so forth. But David is aware of the fact that it is not yet a spiritual capital, because the ark is some distance away. So what David plans, what David brings about, is to bring this symbol of God's presence and bring it into the heart of his capital. So the story that we're going to hear now is in three parts, but we'll hear it all together. The first part is the ark making a small amount of distance. So it's as if the town where it is here and Jerusalem is that end, it gets as far as here. Then there's another part to the story which to our culture is a shocking part of the story, and it will make us stop and think, what is this saying about God? And here we'll pause for several months, and then we'll pick up the story again, and the ark will get as far as Jerusalem. So we're going to hear the story now of the ark of the Lord coming from where it is in the village, a little distance with great rejoicing, then this other incident, and then finally it's brought all the way to Jerusalem. Thank you very much.
Well, the reading is from second book of Samuel, and it's chapter 6, and I'm reading verses 1 to 19. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Baal in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim and the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which is on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with their might before the Lord with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went up to bring the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and fattened calf. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window, and when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it, and David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women. And all the people went to their homes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. If you volunteer to read, just always check that you're going to get a nice parable from Luke's Gospel as opposed to part of the Old Testament with impossible names that nobody knows how to pronounce. You did fantastically. Thank you very much indeed. So, two parts to this story. The story of the ark coming into Jerusalem. So let's remember, Jerusalem is the capital city. This is where commerce happens. This is where trade happens. This is where there is wealth, where there's a load of people. This is where politics happen and wheeling and dealing goes on. And this is where the court is. This is where David is. This is where the military is based. And into this, David brings the ark of the Lord. Into all of that is going on with rejoicing, David brings the ark in. So if we could just go back to the PowerPoint, please. So let's see how he brings it in. Verse 1, David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. In other words, the pick of the nation. Apologise, this, cultures are different and how we see people is different, but for that time, the most important, the people who can contribute the most, or certainly seen to, here they are in great number. The young men are there, 30,000 of them. He's not sneaking the ark into Jerusalem. He's bringing it in with the country behind him. Verse 12, towards the end of this, so David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David, in other words, to Jerusalem, with rejoicing. This is a great day. When you look back and say, the best day of my life was, the birth of this child, earning some money, getting a flat, passing my driving test, that's what David was feeling like. Great rejoicing, great celebration was going on. Conscious of the fact that the ark is a symbol of God, then sacrifices are made. We're not sure how many times. We read here that 6 steps were taken and he sacrificed a bull and a fatted calf. It's possible that every 6 steps they made a sacrifice. So can you picture that? Every time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, stop for a sacrifice. And then again, and then again, and then again. So, does this sound over the top? Well, yes, it does, doesn't it? But maybe it's a symbol of just how important this was to David, that God is being brought into the centre of his capital. And then we read here, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might. Now, there's no holding back here. He is king. He has all the splendour and all the sort of regalia that goes with that. But he's dancing with all his might, wearing not a large amount of clothes, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. And indeed, another verse, we had a long list of different instruments that were used. This is not something that was being hidden. Bringing God into the centre of the commerce, the wealth, the political wheeling, dealing, the court, the things that are going on, the army, the military, and so forth. This is a great, great day. And it's done with the whole country, and it's done with a great sense of rejoicing and celebration. And for us, I wonder, we have our capital, as it were. We have our centre. We have the jobs that we do. We have our commerce. We go out to work. We deal with paying bills. We deal with paying people that need to be paid or making money. We have our community. We have our families, we have our friends, we have people that we deal with in our work, when we go out to shop, in the clubs that we do, in the people that we might meet at church, the people that we like, and part of our communities that we don't like. we have those that are going on as well. We have the decision making that we have to do. How are we going to spend our time? How are we going to spend our money? What are we going to do with this coming week? What are we going to do this afternoon? Decision making, things that happen in capital cities. And I wonder, is there that sense of celebration and rejoicing? That just as God was brought symbolically into David's capital, so God is also in the centre of all of those things that we do. And whether we know that God is there, whether we've made a deliberate decision that God is there, maybe it's something that's happening gradually, slowly over time. And that we recognise that God is there, and this is something that's good. This isn't something that's troubling. This isn't something that's going to make our life harder, but in the centre of all of the decisions and the things that we do with our life, God is there. And the trumpets should be played, and we should be singing, and we should be dancing, even if it's only in our minds, for God is in the centre. What an uplifting story, something to take us away with a real sense of celebration and praise. But in the middle was this other bit of the story. The ark got so far, and then there's this other incident, and then it continues on to Jerusalem. And this is what we had read to us. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. So it looked as though the ark was going to fall on the floor. So he puts up his hand, maybe a natural reflex, to stop it falling onto the floor. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. And the reason why the ark didn't get to Jerusalem for a while is because David was so angry about this that he didn't want anything more to do with it. So, what are we going to make of this story? This wonderful story of the ark and God being in the centre, and we take that and we're happy with it and it fits with our culture, and then we read this. What are we going to say about this? This is so contrary to what we know of God through the New Testament, and much has to be said of the Old Testament as well. This is so contrary to what we know of Jesus Christ, who came a God of compassion, a God of love, a God of forgiveness, and yet we read this. Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, we read this, these are the words that are written, but we don't actually know what happens. There's almost certainly some length of time between what happened and when it was written down. So what actually happened might have been interpreted in a particular way by the people who actually wrote it down. They wanted to put a message over. It's possible this happened exactly like this, in a sort of physiological way. Possibly he put his hand out, knew it was the wrong thing to do, and collapsed with a heart attack. And people add the interpretation that this is what God wanted. So I don't want us to go away today with saying, this is what happened, this is exactly what must have happened because it's written down. But there may well have been an element of interpretation that's going on here. Neither do I want us to go away and think that this is how God acts from the New Testament and in our culture today. This is not what we would expect to happen. However, this is written here, and I do think that there is something we can take from this, if not the actual, he did something that seems totally reasonable to us, doesn't it? You put your hand out to stop something or someone falling, but it was not what God wanted to happen and had made that clear. So I think just one thing I would like us to take from perhaps what lies behind this. And that is that as people of the New Testament, we believe rightly that Christ came to live as one of us, like you and like me, and understands the sorts of lives that we lead. And by the giving of the Holy Spirit, God is with us. God is alongside us. God is loving us. God is encouraging us, supporting us, befriending us. But I do just want to say that there is another side to God, another part of God, as it were, and that is that God is holy, and God is different, and God is beyond anything that we can know or fully understand. And we do a disservice to God, and I think we do a disservice to our understanding and our belief if we simply say God is our friend, God is our brother, God is our supporter, and all the rest of it, all of which is true. I'm not saying it's an either or, and what I've just talked about doesn't happen. Of course it happens. Of course Jesus lived as a human. Of course the Holy Spirit is there to advocate for us and to support us and to encourage and to comfort us. But we worship a God who is bigger than us. God is not simply the same as us. God is bigger, God is different, God is almighty, eternal, God is outside time, God is capable of everything, and God is holy. And God sets rules that are for our benefit. And if we break them, there are consequences, as when we break any rules. And that's why Jesus came. So if we don't believe in the holiness of God, effectively we're saying there was no reason for Christ to come. Christ came to make the difference between that gap of the rules that are set and the ways in which we choose to live our lives. So the story we've looked at today, this isn't an easy morning. I apologise, it's August, isn't it? The sun is shining, we've all come for a good time, and actually we've had a difficult passage in front of us. Let's take from this that in the centre of our lives, in the capital centre of what we choose to do and the decisions we make and the people that we are, we can rejoice and celebrate and tell others that Christ is there in the middle. But let's remember that Christ came in order to bridge the gap between the people that we are and the holy, magnificent, almighty, awesome God that we worship day by day.